Welcome to Making Events Matter. My name's Steve Bather. I've been a facilitator for well over 30 years. And my colleague, Dom.
Hello.
Dom, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dom Honey, and I'm an event producer and community manager.
And we've been working together for years, and we wanted to just put this podcast together to explain our approach to events, what's happening in the event space, and how to make your events different, valuable, and really have a legacy that goes way beyond the end of the event. And I think this is an opportunity to really examine what we've learnt and what the current optimized event looks like in this very busy and changing world, where people really don't have time to get much more than transient value from the event.
So what have you been doing for the last 30 years? What have you been focusing on?
As a event designer and facilitator, I guess the core skill is really understanding how to bring alive the vision the customer has for the event and make sure it delivers on its objectives and purpose, and that the individual participants, from whatever perspective they're joining the event, go away with a real sense of value and contribution. So they've been engaged in the process and they've got something of value to take back to their own organization that will then build and add further value in the future. Yeah. I think so many events over the last 30 years are designed right up until 5 o'clock on day 3. And then there is nothing. People go back, they get immersed in the week's work that they've missed and catching up. And it's another 10 days before they even think about what came out of the event. And I think it's at that moment. So possibly the shorter answer to your question is that we focus on the legacy of the event before we even start designing the event, so we know what value it will have going forward.
Yeah, no, that's well put for how our events have evolved. My background is more on the technology side, so I cut my teeth in interactive events long before platforms like Slido or other technologies came along, or event apps concerned with how large audiences shared their ideas, observations, reflections, and make action plans live during an event. This was groundbreaking 30 years ago, but obviously time has moved on. But so whilst you are very focused on design and objectives and outcomes, I'm been more interested in the technology side, the delivery of digital platforms, also interaction, live streaming, production in all forms of the event space. So live, in person, hybrid and virtual. So between us, we complement one another really well. We both understand a bit about the other's role and can help. I am interested in design and format and session, but you take the lead there, whereas and you have, you are technically able, even though you still use Windows. So, can't teach every old dog a new trick. But regardless of that, but we've evolved. So over 30 years, we were in one place, and today what we're talking about at Making Events Matter is our experience really over the last 3 or 4 years, where technology has moved on. People are more comfortable with digital tools at events, but then thinking about, as you said, legacy and momentum post-event, which has been hard to do over the years, because, as you said, people go back to their day jobs. They've kind of had a good event experience. They might have met 1 or 2 new people, but really the momentum often dwindles quickly after people return to their day job. So how do you establish community? How do you build community? How do you continue sharing interesting content to drive interest in the subject matter of the conference, or continue to meet the objectives of the event?
And I think that legacy really starts with the beginning of the design process, where we look at the what's in it for them, and we kind of make sense of who the participants are. We're heavily involved in the invitation process and aligning people to what we're trying to achieve in the event. But we really also listen to them in terms of what would be of value to them, and how they can get the best value for money, and of course the legacy, that value going onwards from the end of the event. But I wanted to pick up on one or two things you said. You mentioned this kind of 3 or 4 year timescale where you felt that things had shifted significantly. I guess we can't really talk about the different types of events without mentioning COVID and that incredible impact it had on how confronted people were in terms of having to work remotely. And the other thing we're going to go into more detail, I think, is the sort of the words and the phrases used for events. So you used virtual, remote, obviously in person, and then hybrid. So I think we should come back to those terms and really set out what we believe are those different styles of event, and of course what the different techniques and technologies and approach are necessary in each of those types of events. But just tell us a little bit about this kind of massive impact of COVID.
It changed everything. I think people pre-COVID and pre-lockdown were comfortable in person. Didn't really, you needed a good reason to run a virtual event. And in lockdown, when people couldn't leave their homes and had to work, and by and large had to work from home, it meant that people had to embrace online video calling, for example, but also online events in a way that they'd not done before. So, for example, I worked with a university who needed to put on a large showcase event, 3 days, 3,000 people, had to be online. It was hosted by, I'm going to have to cut this because I can't remember her name, Hillary Clinton. So it was hosted by Hillary Clinton.
I was going to ask you about her, yes.
Yeah. And so she was based in the States. We had speakers from all over the globe. We had an audience from all over the globe. It didn't matter. We had a platform that supported VIPs through to general attendees, exhibition area, etc. And was was brilliant. We had a studio in Swansea, so a physical studio where some people met. We had speakers elsewhere, so it was a complicated production, but overall we were looking to raise the profile of the university and assist with their fundraising. Effectively, that was the reason it was put on. So, and then once COVID had passed, I mean, we had huge numbers of virtual events during that period. But post-COVID, although people were still comfortable with the idea of having video calling, etc., endless Teams and Zooms, a lot of people really looked to go back to in-person. There was a sort of a big rush, and in fact, the same university wanted to do an in-person equivalent of this large event. So it was a peak. And I think what we've seen since is a rebalancing, even though what we tried to do and what we continue to do at virtual events is try to achieve the same experience a person will have in person at a virtual event. But it is quite hard to make that argument without somebody actually experiencing the our process and our production and our support.
Yeah, and I think we'll come on to that and how we manage that participant experience so that it's irrespective of whether you're online or in person. But just picking up, there was
it really makes it. Sorry.
Go on.
I think it really makes a difference in the hybrid sense. I think, although that is probably the most complex style of event that we support, I think it's most prevalent there because we really do join up the audiences. We have in person and online, and we are able to really give an immersive experience to both sets of participants. Many times I've been to hybrid, and it's, really the two audiences don't interact with one another. They don't meet, they don't connect. It's just a webinar or a live stream for the online participants, and the in-person audience get to network and meet and collaborate. But our approach really does make sure that both audiences are able to have a very similar experience and connect and share and collaborate.
So let's go a little bit further into that. So you're defining the hybrid as something that is a little more than just one or two people dialing in, to use the old vernacular, or kind of being, in a Zoom meeting that's associated with an in-person meeting. So in your world, what is hybrid specifically?
Well, a hybrid is where you've got an in-person audience attending, and the people are in a room or multiple rooms, and they're taking part in an event with an agenda over one or more days. But hybrid means that there is also an online audience who are not just watching and listening, at their screen or wherever they are, but they are actually able to ask questions, they are able to network, they are able to participate in smaller table, group or breakout activities.
With people in the room?
With people in the room,
Yeah.
that's right. So
Okay.
so it doesn't make any difference whether a person is physically present in room or whether they are online, watching from their desktop at home or at the office.
Yeah, and I think that experience again, following the bounce back from lockdowns and COVID, and being confronted into a new way of working. That's how it kind of appeared to a lot of people, and I think Zoom became more familiar to you than perhaps your own families at the time. Spending more time with
And I
as
think,
well.
I think it's good of you to mute your phone before this podcast.
Thank you.
Well done. Hasn't not every rule of podcasting or working online has quite sunk in.
How's that?
But we'll definitely come back to later in these episodes. We'll definitely come back to more specific conversation and thoughts and learnings about each of these individual areas, because they all, whether you're in person exclusively or online exclusively or a blend of both, we have a different approach, and we've taken different approaches each time, and that's both in how you format the agenda and design the agenda and advise the client and what objectives you consider, but also the production and the technical support and advice you need to give to speakers and the attendees. So it is we could spend quite a lot of time on each of those different formats, and we will in episodes we'll do later on.
Yeah. And I think the the hint at the complexity of managing the technology and the environment for one of those complex in person or indeed these hybrid or blended events is really significant, and is only really understood by people who have insight into what it takes to deliver something like that. So the dynamics, for example, are, you talked about kind of breakout groups that involve those who are not physically present, i.e., remote, and those who are in the room. But it also means that there needs to be two-way communication. So there needs to be high-definition video, both from the participant's point of view who is remote. They need to be heard clearly. They need to be able to indicate when they want to speak. And that needs to be represented in the room where you've got perhaps 150, 200 people who are also considering those participants remotely and their needs in the way that they talk. So one thing, for example, is that we have multiple microphones in the room. people talking in the room have to wait for the microphone to be there. So you need runners, and you
Yes.
need people there so that, that sound is clear, not only to the people in the room, as is normal, but to those people who are online, so they get a clear sense of their participation and involvement and engagement in the discussion topics.
That's right, and we'll delve into this in much more detail. But we ideally need 3 or probably 4 cameras in the room, in the main room as well, and we'd need audience members online who are prepared to switch their camera on and participate fully, which again needs effort and consideration, because not everyone attends an event who are online who are prepared even just to speak with their microphone. So we give them a different option, and we'll talk again in more detail about the kind of collaborative tools that we deploy for all types of events, which allow people to anonymously contribute regardless of location or seniority. It provides a level playing field in a way that other tools, which are just asking for Q&A questions effectively, can't do. So we'll again in future episodes talk more about XSleep and some of the other platforms that we have deployed really successfully that make a really big difference to the outcomes or the experience during the event, but also the outcomes, because when you type content in or responses to workshop prompts or have discussions and capture the key points, then that's all collected and reportable and valuable. And then that starts to take us down the track of legacy and post-event momentum. And again, in future episodes, we'll definitely touch in more detail on all of those things, all of those elements.
Brilliant. And I guess the core principles that we've arrived at through our experience of working together and designing events comes down to 4, really. It's the co-designing with the client, understanding what the client's needs are, what they're looking for in terms of what's possible, but also try and extend that conversation, as you've just said, Dom, to include a real legacy, a real measurable legacy and a value from the event afterwards. So it's focused on the client's goals, of course, but we also make sure that the value, the return on investment, makes sense for everybody who's being invited, whether they're being a speaker, a presenter, a session owner, or a participant. Everybody has their own needs from it, which need to be accommodated in that first key principle of co-designing events focused on the goals.
And thank you for joining us on this first episode of our first podcast called Making Events Matter. I've been Dom Honey and been delighted to be joined by my colleague and partner in crime, Steve Bather. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Dom.